everybody, and thank you for tuning in to today's episode of Armchair Gaming. I am your host, the Unbearable Gamer. Today we're taking what could be our last look at video games as art, unless we get a good conversation going about it about a later date and time. Today we're playing some Monster Hunter World, newer release. Usually I play older games, as I'm sure you guys have noticed, or games that at least I know quite well. I haven't played Monster Hunter World a lot. Not for lack of want, just for, oh shoot, bad idea. Just for lack of, I don't remember. I didn't get into it right away. I should have. I love the Monster Hunter series. No, you didn't fly very far. Weird bird thing. Uh-oh. No, stop that. Let me beat you up. So... Today we're going to look at how video games as an art form have evolved, and just as important, we're going to look at how video games have encouraged the art world to evolve. There we go. So, this is a really good time. I like this. I'm very happy with how this just went. In today's episode, I was torn between playing this game and another favorite of mine, Undertale. And I chose this game over Undertale, because Undertale is full of spoilers, and even though it's a couple years old, not a lot of people have like actively pursued and played it, which I think is crazy, and I would recommend everybody who has an interest in Undertale plays it. It's an amazing game, and it will certainly change the way you look at if not video games as a whole, it'll change how you look at the video game community in that particular instance. Oh, that's a very slow-moving timer. We're all done, but that's okay. Nice. Sorry, pardon me. Sorry about that. So, I may not be the best person to talk about the evolution of video games overall. By and large, because it's certainly not my wheelhouse or expertise. I didn't grow up in a household with video game collectors or video game nerds. My first real console was the original NES, and then we moved from there to Sega Genesis, which makes me happy. I love the Sega Genesis; it's an awesome console. But over and above that, what was I going to say there? There is my understanding in the history of video games is pretty muted. That being said, there is certainly there is certainly something to be said of the video game history, and we have a couple of really good collectors and historians in our channel, which are worth picking their brains at, prevalently for the history. But video games have obviously evolved from simple 8-bit games like Pong, through text-based adventures, like 16-bit, 32-bit, 64-bit. That evolution has extended what the participants or the artists themselves have the capacity to do, and that extension of creativity beyond a simple ping-pong-based game like Pong, not Pong, to games like Monster Hunter World, where you're exploring dynamic worlds, hunting gigantic, monsters, is incredibly important to note. Because it makes a big difference, obviously, in what the art's capable of doing. Not to say that Pong isn't a classic, and Pong is still emulated to this day, right? And there's lots of people who play Pong, and lots of developers who look for ways to play Pong, like to reiterate Pong, including some who are doing it in VR, which is really cool. And that appears to be the next step in video game evolution now that we have...
Begin the Elder Dragon investigation.
Cool.
Make sure you know what you need to
Sounds good, buddy.
So now we need to protect the scholars. Let's regroup at the Wildspire
No,
West.
I refuse. This evolution has allowed for, like I said, the artists who create video games, which in this case would be obviously studios or individuals. Like in the case of Undertale, Toby did a lot of the work by himself. Not to say he didn't have a lot of help, and he acknowledges and accepts the help he's received. He's very open about it. But that's a guy who did a lot of the work himself to get where he was. Yes. Cool. Sounds good. But the evolution of video games has also forced the rest of the art world to evolve, and certainly there's people in the art world who maybe disagree with me, and To them, I'd say, okay, sure, you're probably correct, but stop that, go up. There we go. I think it's important to recognize that there's a... Ooh, neat Kestodon. Ooh, those look fun. Candy Forge. What is it? Wow. I can do the Jagras stuff, which might be of more value to me. Oh, neat. Pukey materials. Pukey tail. Uh-huh. Okay. Cool. Jagras helm. Jagras mail. Sorry, I got sidetracked there. I'm coming back. I'm going full circle, everybody. Yeah, so... I'm losing my brain again. Coming back. We're coming back. I promise we're coming back. Yes, please. When we evaluate video game world's effect on the greater art community, it's worth noting all of the... Yes, please. Nice. I think it's worth noting all the cool things that the video game community has done for the art world. And when I say that, I mean specifically how art has gone from being passively about the or passively engaged in the individuals to actively engaged in the individuals, and by that I mean the people who participate in art. When you are when you are okay, neat. Oh, I can't do that yet though, can I? I'm missing earth crystals. That's fine. Ooh, neat. I might look at that later. Alright, so we're going to come back to that. Let's start another mission. Yeah, the video game community has shifted the landscape of the art world drastically, and in a variety of ways. And I first mentioned the fact that we've gone from, passive participants to more active participants. And by that I mean video games demand active participation from the players, right? When you're playing a game, be it a racing game or a party game or a game like Monster Hunter World or an RPG, the story unfolds specific to your engagement. When you don't play it, the story ceases to exist, essentially. And I mean, we could walk down the philosophical rabbit hole of art being exactly the same. When you look at a painting, it's only its perception that allows it to be an art form. But at the end of the day, the creation of art, be it literary, musical, or I guess on canvas or sculpture or whatever medium it is, besides video games, the participation by the consumer is secondary to its production. At least from my perspective, because when Leonardo da Vinci, no, I don't know any of his works. I'm trying to think of a good artist that I know. I don't know. That's a terrible show for me right there. Whenever a painter paints a piece of artwork, with the exception of portraits that they intend to sell, the participant or the consumer or the observer plays a backstage role to the creator of that piece of art. Insofar that once the painting is completed, it's static. There's no shifts. There's no way to look at this game. There's no way to look at the art that will shift not its perspective, but it's what's the word I'm looking for here? No, I don't want to do that. I just want to go explore. There's nothing that shifts how we, the consumer, can interact on it, right? Like, it's there. We can all have our own perception of it, but we literally cannot augment that art piece without forever changing it. Yeah, let's go on a low rank expedition. Sure. So there's that to think about. But there's also, performing artists on the streets and magicians where there is some consumer interaction, but that's limited to a secondary role. And I'm going to get to what I mean in a second, and how video games are different. But when, you go to a magic show and an audience member gets picked up on stage, it's either a quote-unquote plant, which I'm certain happens, or it's somebody who they're going to be acted on, not acted with. The magician will give them cues and specific set of instructions, and if they don't follow it exactly, they ruin it, or have the potential to ruin it anyways. Video games are different, and I actually had a really cool conversation with a friend who's studying copyright, and I hope he doesn't mind me talking about it briefly. But when you look at something like speedrunners, are probably the best example, where they look to aggressively and assertively change the landscape of the video game itself for their own benefit, which they look for loopholes. They look for things that maybe the video game developers didn't think of, which seems crazy, but it's very much the truth. All right, there is this shift and augmentation from. Oh, we're climbing up, aren't we? Why aren't we climbing? There's this. You play when you play the video game, or you play the board game or anything like that. You're looking for loopholes, and you become an active participant in the creation of art. I would argue, because it's your interaction that allows the story to progress directly. If you were to read the Harry Potter books, the story already exists from beginning to end, and the programming for a video game certainly exists from beginning to end in a linear game. But in a non-linear open world game, that isn't the case. There is some room for shift and change, and the story doesn't need to follow an exact pattern for it to be told, right? And that's an important distinction. Is that how well you play the video game, or how you choose to interact with the video game, will shift how the video game tells its story. So that's one way they differ, and the art community is certainly learning from that. Even if it is just a limited fashion, the video game community is, or not the video game, the art community is looking for more ways to actively engage with its consumer in a less and less passive role. It's looking for ways for consumers to be more involved. And I guess the first example would be augmented reality. And augmented reality essentially changes like the real landscape. Like, if you're unfamiliar, you have like an app on your phone or something that, what's up, friends? I'm just gonna like walk past you. If you decide you want to fight me, you can, but I'll kill you. That's what I thought. Boom. So, augmented reality, even if it's very small, like just provides more in-depth information about the artists or the artist's timeline when you're at like an art exhibit. You hold your phone up to the painting, and then your phone recognizes, oh, it's this painting by such and such an artist, which means it has this, like, it was done in this time, and this artist was going through this phase of their life. There's this... Ew, did I lick that? That's gross. The shift encourages us to think, this shift allows for more interaction with the painting or the artist when you're listening to a piece of music, and your phone can tell you who the artist is automatically, because you've got an app on it that lets you, like, if you're like, I really like this song, but I don't know who creates it, and you hold your phone up to your radio and it tells you automatically. That changes how we consume it. Just as entertaining. No, that's not the right word I want to use. And that's one way that the video game community has allowed us to better understand the video game world that or not the video game, the art community. It shifted how we were able to interact with pieces of art to get more information from them, which is, I think, is really cool. Oh my gosh. The other thing that it's done, and this may more be about accessibility than anything else, is the fact that video games have allowed us to bring art to the people as opposed to the other way around, where you had to go to the art initially. You no longer have to. If you're, say you're confined to a hospital bed, or you're stuck in a wheelchair, and you would like to go check out an art exhibit, you're no longer confined to whether or not you're capable of doing it. You can literally, use your phone, like, rather than like using your phone to scroll through stuff, you can Did I do something? I don't know if I did anything. No, I didn't. That's okay. You can engage with an entire art museum through a VR headset, and that might not seem like much, but when you think about how much that can change for somebody who doesn't have necessarily the ability to go to an exhibit, the VR movement, which is one of the latest. Oh, that's gonna hurt. I'm probably gonna die here. The VR movement has forever changed the way we have the ability to look at art across the board, because now it can bring art to people as opposed to the other way around, which I would argue is incredibly important. There you go. Oh, you can't see me. Yeah, so these two things have forced the art community to shift, and I mean, obviously the art community has always striven to engage in some interactivity. Like I said, performing arts like magic shows and illusionists and hypnotists. There's this consumer interaction, but more exciting. I shouldn't say more exciting. It's not more exciting. It's just video games have allowed for more innovation on how that works. You know, there's no longer what do I do? Now it's everything makes sense. Oops, that was neat. Why did I slide? Oh, he's angry. Ooh, neat. So that's gonna do it for today's episode. As I continue to fight this, what's it called, a Pukey? There's this. This episode's gonna run very long. But I think it's important to recognize the impact that video games have on the art community. As video games continue to evolve, there's going to be this evolution of the art community, and the art community seems to largely embrace it. I feel like artists are few and far between to argue that video games are not art. But as they continue to... Oh, he's still mad. Eh? Oh, well, that's fine. I'm alright with that. Did I? Oh, there you go. Anybody. So yeah, that's gonna wrap it up for today's episode. I hope you enjoyed this series. I enjoyed it. We get a little rambly at times. It's an interesting topic for me, that's for sure. I think video games are... I mean, well, let's be real here. We all love video games. That's why we're here. Oops. Oh, that was a bad idea. I was actually hoping to jump on him. Whoa, 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 whoa. Easy there, Tiger. I guess you're not technically a tiger, are you? Yeah, that's it for today's episode. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you maybe learned a little bit. Maybe not a lot, but something. You know, it's always something to learn, right? Can I have your tail? Thank you. Ooh, he's breaking stuff. Oh, now I'm gonna die. Whoa! Yep. Oh, alright. Okay, he is stupid and doesn't know how to do his job. Boom! Am I on? That's fine. So yeah, that's it for today's episode. I hope you guys enjoyed. Hopefully we can look at more philosophy in video games on the next episode. I think I mentioned Undertale at one point. I'm like, well, I am leery of creating a spoiler buzz. I do really think Undertale would be an amazing game to do. It would just be a lot of fun. Where am I? Oh, I'm on his head. So I'm hoping we can take a look at Undertale at some point without causing too much of a fervor over spoilers. I don't want to cause any spoilers, but that could happen. And if you have any questions, same as always, don't be afraid to shoot me a message on Twitter. I would love to chat with people about philosophy of video games. Ooh, shit, I murdered a lot of little Jagresses. Oh, I murdered all the Jagresses, apparently. And that's okay with me. That's their fault. So yeah, that's it for today's episode. I hope you guys enjoyed, and I look forward to hanging out with everybody on the next episode. So thanks for tuning in, and bye for now.